We know from research that it essentially takes a generation for the stupid move to kind of fade from memory. She destroyed it because she literally told the Bud Light consumer, we think you guys are kind of a bunch of frat boy idiots.
You know, we want to help brands that are launching products in this market. And a lot of them are small, but we also feel like we're a resource for a big brand who maybe a single phone call to somebody who represents 60% of their customer base might have saved them $47 billion. Well, today we're here with Dr. Mark Young, host of the Blunt Force Truth podcast, best-selling author, advertising and marketing expert, and, which we're definitely going to talk about, professional race car driver. And we met Dr. Young at a strategic coach event put on by the great Dan Sullivan as an invite from Mike Koenig's, and loved talking to him from the beginning. We're absolute kindred spirits in a whole host of ways. However, Dr. Young is so much more impressive. He holds a PhD in psychology and neuroscience, operates multiple businesses, including advertising, retail distribution, out-of-home TV networks, real estate development, angel investing, health and fitness, and the previously aforementioned professional auto racing. He also hosts several podcasts. His listener base exceeds 600,000 downloads a month, so life goals for those of you listening. But his interests and expertise includes accomplishing your goals at any age, because Dr. Young holds the Guinness World Record for being the oldest professional rookie race car driver at 58 years old. I don't believe that. He probably faked it. And he doesn't look 58, but here we are. He's also
67. I am 67.
Oh, Kurt.
Young's a skilled expert in human longevity and biohacking, probably why he looks so great. His podcast, Blunt Force Truth, which we're aware of, focuses on current events and politics with a no-nonsense conservative perspective. Dr. Young deconstructs the sound bites to get to the underlying story, which makes that podcast so interesting. But let's get into what I'm most interested in. I want to learn about the decision to start racing at 58.
Yeah, I started at around 58. So I've actually my wife bought me a track day. So I've always been a guy with exotic cars and fun cars. Raced when I was a kid and then got away from it. And she bought me a track day about 8 or 9 years ago. And I'm like, okay, that was fun. I think I'll do that again next year. And did another one or two. And then it's like, yeah, that was good. I'd like to do a little more of that. And then I started realizing how horrible I was at it. Jay Leno has a great joke, which is the two things that all men grossly overrate themselves on, which is driving race cars and sex.
No, never.
So I joined a group called NASA, which is a national group, and they do training. So I literally jumped in here about 5-6 years ago, went through the entire training program, and rose up through the training to become, now I'm actually a nationally certified instructor, and I have a pro license. I am actually racing this Saturday at the Charlotte Roval, which is one of the most difficult tracks in the nation. It's a NASCAR track. And we're doing a 12-hour endurance race on Saturday.
Oh, my goodness.
I won't drive the entire 12.
No, it's exhausting. I mean, it takes a lot out of you to do this. So that sounds really intense.
We'll do, I'll spend 2 or 3 hours in the car and then another driver will get in. But yes, we'll do 2 or 3 hours at a track, driving on a track that is completely cement walls every place you look, at the edge of grip, and it will be about 165 degrees inside that car.
Oh my goodness.
Yikes. What kind of car is it that you're driving?
We have several cars on the team, but we're driving the car. This is its first race. We call it the Chev Stang. And we put a Chevy LS motor with a Cadillac transmission into a Mustang.
Wow.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So it obviously, I suppose with it being an endurance race, is it first to complete a certain amount of laps, or how does that work?
Endurance racing is a little different because endurance racing is less about being fearless and more about being intelligent. So the guys who lose are the guys who go out and try to win a 12-hour race in the first lap because they end up crashing out, but those people exist. So the real key to an endurance race is to stay on the track. Don't destroy your car, save fuel, save tires, be smart. Don't try to drive at 100%. Try to finish the race.
It is.
Because winning an endurance race is about being there on the last lap. So it's really about who turns the most laps. So if you have the best pit crew, the best pit strategy, the best fuel strategy, and you're an okay driver, you can be competitive. So I kind of refer to that. I'm kind of like, one of the okayest professional race car drivers in the field. My team is actually the oldest team in the circuit. We're in the World Racing League, and we're literally the oldest team in the circuit.
You're the Cal Ripken Juniors of the racing team, dependable, always showing up, and lasting the longest, I suppose. Are you
the oldest team, and we almost always finish, and we win more often than we don't.
So is it kind of World Racing League? So it's the typical racing kind of model. You guys have sponsors, and is it a televised race, or is there some place we can watch it?
WRL actually has a YouTube channel, World Racing League WRL channel, which actually transmits the race live on Saturday. So yes, it actually is broadcast, and we have cameras inside the car and all around the track. So they'll cut to our camera. You'll be in the car with us on sometimes if you're watching it. We're one notch below IMSA. So IMSA would be Le Mans, Daytona 24 hours, the Rolex 24. So we're one level below that. Our goal is to try to get into the Rolex 24. And there's a reason for that goal. That goal is because I took the Guinness World Record as the oldest driver from Paul Newman. And Paul Newman holds a second record, and he is the oldest person to ever win the 24 hours of Rolex at Daytona. He won that at 70. So now I'm going to see if I can take that record also.
Well, you got time on that,
right?
I
got all kinds of time.
Yeah. Well,
I loved your description of endurance racing, and I was thinking we could do a whole show just on the life lessons, right, and the commonalities of that, and what that teaches you.
Well, let me give you a quick example. Go to a racetrack, and the majority of auto racers and auto racing are essentially Trump rallies.
Right.
And it's not that racers are a bunch of rednecks, because they're not. Formula One is very sophisticated. IMSA is very sophisticated. It's philosophy. When you're a race car driver, there's only one winner. And then there's a second and third place, but they're basically first, second, third, fourth loser. There's one winner. We will burn 190 gallons of gasoline on Saturday. We will torch tires. And when you're an auto racer, you show up, you bring your car, you put your best game on, you win or lose, and if your car gets crashed, it's your problem. Even if you didn't crash it, it's your problem.
Right.
That's capitalism.
Yeah.
Auto racing is a microcosm or a metaphor for a capitalistic economy. And I think that's why you see the majority of people in racing are conservative.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, even dating back 20 years ago to the Bush reelect, they were heavy focused on this giant rig, semi-rig that would show up at NASCAR races to register people to vote, because the percentage of those folks who were Bush voters was so high. And that's stayed that way for 2 decades now.
Well, you do know Let's Go Brandon came from a NASCAR race.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. One of those funny things that just captures and sticks around in culture even today. I see signs, Let's Go Brandon signs, as I drive home from from the Indianapolis Zoo all the time.
Well,
It's funny how that's just kind of stuck around. I also am curious, because you said it, how do you deal with the 185 degrees inside? Is there, because that sounds
a couple things.
death.
One, you need to be in good condition.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to get in a car and drive a car for 2 or 3 hours at maximum capacity in those temperatures and not pass out doing it. So it's conditioning. Remember that when we're braking and turning, we're hitting 4 Gs inside that car. So 4 times the weight of gravity against your body every few seconds. We also have devices which are called cool shirts. So imagine a t-shirt that has plastic tubing all through it, and it is hooked to a cooler full of ice water.
Oh, wow.
And then there's a switch on the dash where I can throw the switch, and it's ice water runs through the shirt, which, by the way, will take your breath away when you throw the switch and run the ice water through your clothing.
Yeah.
It's different than the ice plunge, right? Or the ice bath.
Very much so.
It's like, yeah.
And on Saturday, to put it in perspective, on Saturday, we will actually melt 20 pounds of ice an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Inside that car. And that's with the ice in a cooler. It's actually the body heat that is melting 20 pounds of ice an hour.
Wow. I see these race car drivers in this, what seems, Indy car drivers. We go to the Indy 500 regularly because it's in our backyard, and they're wearing these jumpsuits. And I always think it's got to be hot in there. 185 degrees, though, is sweltering.
Yeah, we always refer to it as a fireproof onesie.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's for protection Yeah.
Well, and it's something that from the outside in, you look at it and you think, okay, this isn't as physically demanding as, say, football or running. But what you're describing is as important. It's as important to have that kind of conditioning.
Race car drivers are as much an athlete as any form of athlete. You take a look at Lewis Hamilton in Formula One. Many people consider him to be the most physically fit athlete in the world. We do an enormous amount of training. We're training reflexes. We're doing weight training with halo devices on our heads to try to build neck muscles. Nutrition. We do everything that any other athlete would do. And like any sport, we have our own specific training that fits the sport.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the stakes are different too, right? I mean, you see these tragic wrecks, right, that occur, and you're describing racing in this area with cement walls, and if you make a mistake and your reflexes aren't great in football, you get knocked down, you can get a concussion, or you could sprain a muscle or something. I'm sure there are worse examples, but the stakes are very high with racing.
They are. The racing's become very safe. We have a lot of great safety equipment and Hans devices and fireproof suits and roll cages and built-in fire suppression in the cars. And so you don't see a lot of deaths in racing in the past few years like you used to in the past. I mean, you go back 20 years ago and Formula One used to probably have a death every race.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, and there's only 20 drivers. So 20 people stepped onto the track and one of us won't make it today.
Mm.
I mean, that's literally what their life used to look like.
Well, here in Indianapolis, there are stories, particularly from, I don't want to call them old timers, but even spectators. The safety for the spectators has gotten so much better, because they used to just, you'd have a wreck and a wheel would come flying off and it would go over the grandstand and people would find them in neighborhoods. And 2 years ago when we were there, one of the wheels hit somebody's car, and thankfully the Indy 500, the folks there at the Brickyard are happy to pay the bill. But it's always there's an element to racing, this sort of adrenaline feeling. I've watched it on TV, then to be there in person, it's an insane experience, particularly the Indy 500, 400,000 people in the stands. It's a mass of humanity. But
the
next time you've got to try it from inside the car.
It sounds like to get into that, Kurt. Although I think I could. Stand it. I don't know if my nerves.
Yeah, apparently I have 18 years before I need to decide.
See?
Well, I should say I'm not 40 anymore, 45. So I guess 13 years. But
now, if you ever come out to any of our events on practice day, because I'm an instructor, I can actually take you out in a car.
yeah, well,
Yes, I can actually put you in a passenger seat and take you out.
I have to take up on that.
Most people get out of the car saying they always have one of two answers. It was the most terrifying thing I ever did, or it was the most exciting thing I ever did. We always get one of those two responses.
Yeah, I did one of those supercar driving experiences a few years back. I drove a Lamborghini and they had a bunch of us on the track at once. And I was the guy everybody kept passing because I'd hit, 95, 100. I'd start getting uncomfortable. It took me about 3 laps before I was really comfortable just hitting the gas and going. But by then they were already shuffling us off. But yeah, I was the old man apparently in the group. But it's just amazing when you get to do something that you're so passionate about, and for a lot of folks, they develop a belief over time that, well, I didn't decide to get into racing when I was 20 something, so I guess it's too late. And I think it's a powerful life example to say, you know what, nope, I can get in and do something like that at 58 and still be doing it when I'm in my 60s and going for the world record still. And so
it's what I try to get people to understand on the longevity side. And I know we're going to talk about conservative politics, but on the longevity side, our human DNA is programmed to go 120 years. This was discovered in 1963 by a Dr. Hayfleck, that we understand cell division. Your DNA is programmed to go 120 years. Now, if we go to the Bible, we can go to Genesis 6:3, and it says, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, but his days shall be numbered 120 years." So science actually validated a statement in the Bible 6,000 years later. So the reason we don't live to be 120 years, there's a number of reasons, but one of those reasons, the main reason, is we kill ourselves with bad food and drinking and drugs or pollution or not exercising or smoking. I mean, we can come up with a 1,000 different reasons. That's why we don't live that long. But we don't have to. Now, you met Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is 80. Dan Sullivan is 80 years old. Dan Sullivan is biologically 67. We know that through testing. He is a 67-year-old who happens to have been here 80 years. We have that kind of capability, but we're not going to get there through the medical system that we have here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Oh, no disagreements there.
Yeah. We have learned a lot about this over the space of years from great people like Reagan Archibald and Tony Robbins.
Very dear friend of mine.
They've been into this longevity stuff, and what's really coming out in the last few years is very exciting. Mm-hmm. And it really, for Kristen and I, as we've talked about it, it really changes your perspective on life when you think, this isn't over at 75, or better yet, I don't have to behave like a old person at that age. I can actually be living and loving life. And it changes sort of, I have time to do some of the stuff that I've always wanted to do. I don't have to live in scarcity. It's a powerful thing. It adds this powerful possibilities, I think.
Right. When your timeline is 120, 67 is not retirement time.
Right.
67 is midlife.
Yeah. And by the way, right about the time most people start really figuring life out is.
So I will tell you this, there is one catch to it. The catch to it is your contemporaries, your siblings, your cousins, the people you grew up with, they're retiring. And you find that the people who you've spent time with in your life have now become old people. And you still love them, but you go visit them like you visited your elderly parents or your grandparents, and you make younger friends.
Yeah.
So you either make friends that are younger or you make friends that are in this same world. So in the case of strategic coach, there's many people in strategic coach that are the same as me. So I'm not unusual as strategic coach. People there are doing unbelievable, crazy things and we get along. But outside of that universe, you tend to make younger friends.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because the people your own age are done. They can't keep up with you anymore.
Yeah. Well, and proximity is so powerful, who you spend your time with. And it's important to find your tribe, people that you can grow with, who challenge you to be, to think bigger, to expand yourself, to get out of your comfort zone and to try new things and to do great things. When you're around those people, you behave differently. And, that's a great example of having a longevity mindset. And a more abundant mindset of what's possible is so important.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and I just think in the middle of all this, racing for 12 hours in 185-degree weather, working on extending 185 degree inside the car. So I guess not weather, but and work and engaging in longevity practices. You're also one of the industry leaders in helping brands launch their goods in a retail environment, which I know for a lot of businesses feels like the absolute holy grail and may feel as tough as finding the holy grail, getting onto shelves in places like Kroger or Walmart. And so being somebody who knows how to do that puts you in great demand. It seems like there's probably a story too about how you learned that business and mastered that space you ought to tell.
We started off, our agency started in direct response. So we were literally selling stuff on TV, but wait, there's more. And a consumer packaged goods company liked what we were doing and came to the agency and said, would you guys want to take on a retail product? We hadn't done retail product. And sure, absolutely. Let's take that on. Let's do that. And we took a product that was the number 330 something in the country, and we got it to number 1 in about 3 years. And we realized, wow, we're really good at this. So that brought more people through the door. And then what we finally did is for boutique agencies, the best thing you can do for a boutique agency is like being a boutique law firm or medical practice, kind of identify your specialty. If you're going to get a divorce, you want to get a divorce lawyer. If you need brain surgery, you want to go to a brain surgeon, not a general surgeon. So in our business, we decided we're going to do what we're great at. And we've built a model that allows us to do that. So we've built a couple of hundred brands. If you go to any Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, there's a product from here on every shelf in the store. And we built relationships with all those people, and we know how to do that. And this gives me a little different perspective on the Liberty Spenders kind of model. And the reason is because when we look at your model of marketing to conservatives, first off, we have to understand that people do business with people they like. They do business with people that they have an ethos with, that they have a relationship with. We share values. And the Liberty Spender model allows people to do that. But we also have to keep in mind that when we're doing those things, who else is in the chain that we have to be concerned with? So let's say that we're selling something direct to consumer. So I'm going to use Black Rifle Coffee. Black Rifle did a great job of selling coffee to patriotic Americans who like to shoot guns and blow things up and like the military. But they were selling it direct to consumer, not through stores. Now, when all of a sudden that product has to be at a Walmart or a Kroger or a Target, now you have to deal with the politics of the retailer. And this is why My Pillow got in trouble. When we look at Mike Lindell built a great business. And then he went from being direct to consumer to being retail. So now he's in Walmart and Bed Bath & Beyond and all these places. And then Mike Lindell stepped off and really got involved in the election, the stolen election model. And these retailers are very sensitive to what the left tells them and does. So, and I'll give you an example. We buy a lot of TV commercials on Fox News and Newsmax. Probably one of their bigger buyers. I tell clients in advance, we're going to put you on Fox News. I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to write an email for you now, which is going to be the email that you send people when they send you an email threatening you. We're just going to get that. We're going to get that out of the way right now. And it helps us have credibility because we tell the client, yes, you're going to get 4 dozen emails threatening to boycott you. I want you to notice that the emails almost have the exact wording. Note that the odds on 4 dozen people writing the same email isn't that great. So understand, these are small groups of people with many email accounts that are sending you complaints. So as an example, let's say they're on Fox News. Well, if they're on Fox News, I'll probably run some spots over on CNN. And then the email says, thank you for contacting us. We're glad that you paid attention to our commercial. As you can imagine, we're in the business of selling goods and services to the public. The Fox News network does a great job and an efficient job of reaching that particular demographic. You may also notice our commercial being on CNN and MSNBC because our position is we're trying to reach people capable and in need of our product, not people based on their politics. So that's how we deal with that. Now, that being said, you can build a great brand around a particular cohort, such as conservatives. I'll give you an example. A brand that is passionately loved by 1 million people is more valuable than a brand that is known by all 340 million people, but not passionately cared about. And the example is, if brand recognition was the key to success, Kmart would still be here. Because who has not heard of Kmart? Who has not heard of Sears? They had branding. They had all the branding in the world. They had no relationship. They didn't mean anything. When you think about a Walmart, Walmart means everyday low price, EDLP. When you think of Target, cheap chic, right? That's Target. So the brands who develop messages and develop relationships and ethos with their clients are the brands that can make it. So can you build a brand just around conservatives? Of course you can, because it's anywhere from 40 to 100 million people that will be passionately engaged in your product. I'll jump back to auto racing for a minute. We happen to know through an enormous amount of surveys that 75 to 80% of race fans have purchased a product in the past 6 months that was on a car because they appreciate the fact that you bring me my passion. And that's why you see M&M's and Reese's Pieces and Tide and all these brands, because the viewers, the audience is passionate about racing. Therefore, I support the people who support me. Well, can you get anything more passionate than politics or faith?
Absolutely. And what we tell people, because we get this from folks sometimes, they say, well, I don't want to limit myself. And I'll say it's better to be something to somebody than nothing to everybody.
Right. That's Kmart. Yeah. Kmart is, everybody knows it. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, and you see that in some of these brands that have been built. They don't need to be nationwide known to build valuable companies. We had one of the board members of Patriot Mobile on our show just a few weeks ago, and they are up to almost 140,000 subscribers. And that probably values them at $170 to $200 million. And that's just figuring out how to capture 140,000 conservatives and people of faith to get wireless service from you. And so, you don't have to be, you don't have to get the whole country to build it to power.
You don't. There are brands who sell to the whole country. And I have some of those brands. Bob Evans mashed potatoes. That's a client of ours. I mean, they sell to everybody. Who doesn't want to buy mashed potatoes and mac and cheese?
Right.
And their mashed potatoes are really good.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they? But they sell $1 billion a year in potatoes. So would it make sense for Bob Evans to become political? No, because they don't need to. At this point, there's no value in it for them. Now let's go back to...
And would then also be true, right? It's just like when we share people about the Bud Light fiasco, right? You cannot go that route, and you can also ruin yourself by not being aware of who your customers are. And I bet a lot of the core consumers that would frequent a Bob Evans are probably our Liberty spenders. And so while you might argue, right, you don't have to get overtly political, and I would 100% agree, the reverse is also true, that they would be cautious and wouldn't want to go in a different direction, right, either way.
Absolutely. When we look at the demographics for mashed potatoes, or we look at the demographics for our pasta sauce client, they're empty nesters, they're convenience buyers, they're churchgoers, they tend to vote Republican, they watch Fox News, that's their number one television network. I mean, they fall into the basket. But it makes sense to speak to them, but you don't necessarily have to overtly pursue the politics. But now let's take a look. Let's go back to Black Rifle Coffee. Black Rifle Coffee wouldn't exist if they didn't put a stake in the ground and say, this is what we're selling to, because coffee's too competitive. There's too many brands out there for them to have just broke into the category. So when you look at these brands, let's say you're in a crowded category. And we have what we call quiet categories and crowded categories. Quiet category, I'll give you an example. This is where I have a client. Quiet category is hemorrhoids. Preparation H controlled the category. There was almost nothing else in the category. We brought another client out called Recticare, which is now number 2 in the category. It was easy for us. It was literally easy to become number 2 because nobody was competing. And America likes choice. So it made sense to do that. But now let's look at a crowded category like coffee. Hundreds and hundreds of companies in the coffee business. So to break into that category requires that you have some ethos and some relationship and something that makes you different. And to say that, well, my coffee tastes better, well, that's subjective. Some people hate Starbucks. Some people live by Starbucks. So to say that we have the best tasting coffee, I don't believe you. So what? To say that we grow our beans on the side of a mountain, whatever. To say that we're the coffee for patriotic, Bible-toting, gun-clutching, military-loving coffee drinkers, that's a spike in the ground where people who relate to that can say, by God, if I'm going to give my money to somebody, I'm going to give my money to somebody who appreciates me.
It's interesting, the coffee thing. We keep running into really powerful coffee brands building something in this sort of ethos space. There's two really fantastic companies we recently talked to. One is a company called 7 Weeks Coffee that supports crisis pregnancy centers, which has gone D2C, and they've generated a multi-million-dollar coffee business this way. And another one is a great company I'm excited to feature. They're called I Have a Bean, based in Wheaton, Illinois. And what they've done is they hire what they call post-prison folks to roast their coffee. And their story is so powerful of how they've transformed the lives of these folks who get out of prison and can't find jobs. He hires them and puts a lot of faith and a lot of trust into them. And it's really powerful, but it's really fascinating that not just Black Rifle Coffee, but there's these other kind of coffee brands that really want to pursue marketing, talking about their values, whether it's of faith or in the case of 7 Weeks pro-life. So there's something in the coffee, so to speak.
Yeah, they're finding their niche.
It's a crowded category, like you were saying.
It is a crowded category. I mean, we saw this with the brand Tom's Shoes. Tom's Shoes. Any of you bought Tom's Shoes? There's nothing exceptional about Tom's Shoes. The only thing that made them exceptional was when you buy a pair of shoes, we're going to give a pair of shoes to some poor person who doesn't have any shoes. So it appeals to that person who feels that way. What's interesting is when we think about Republicans, conservatives, Christians, they tend to, that tends to, if it was a Venn diagram, which I won't even get into how much Kamala Harris loves Venn diagrams, but if it was, the center of it would be quite large in this particular diagram. But inside that group are many subgroups. And you'll find that there's lots of great causes, lots of great ethos and relationships that you can focus in on. So, for instance, I'm working with a group right now who is the human trafficking hotline.
Oh, wow.
So they're the national hotline for human trafficking. If you're not familiar with it, you'd be shocked to see the volume of calls they get and how big a problem human trafficking is and where it comes from. Most of it comes from families selling their own family.
Yes.
So when we break down the demographics for people who support preventing human trafficking, guess who those people are? They're conservatives.
Yes.
It's conservatives that put their money into it.
See, that's interesting. That's not something that I think people would guess.
Yeah, it is.
I would certainly predict it to be more bipartisan, right? It's such a universal evil, right?
Well, there's a reason. The reason the left doesn't get involved in it because they cannot explain away the border crisis.
Right.
So it's very hard for me to say it's hard for me to accept that human trafficking is a problem and support what's going on at the border.
Right.
So I kind of have to stick my head in the sand and say, no, it's not a thing.
Yeah. Well, there certainly was, wouldn't it? Why am I forgetting the name of that movie that we saw that was so great it was so entertaining, was frightening at the same time about human trafficking, about the Underground Railroad, I think is the name of the organization. And there was at the time a bunch of sort of typically center-left publications who wanted to minimize the seriousness of human trafficking and claim it was some sort of almost conservative conspiracy to say it was a real thing. And I was really shocked at the coverage of it. I thought, how did we make something so obviously evil partisan?
And that's what I'm saying. There's these niches inside the group.
Yes.
Weight training, strength training, weight training, that particular type of physical fitness is now, we identify that as more of a conservative behavior than a left behavior. The left isn't big on training with weights. Doesn't mean they don't want to be in condition. It doesn't mean they don't exercise, but it's not strength training. That falls to the conservative side. So what if you're selling protein drinks? What if you're selling weight training supplements? Yes, you can appeal to people to train with weights, but can you come further down the funnel and start to become the protein drink for patriotic Americans? Because we know that the behavior is aligned. And we already know there's 100 different protein drinks on the market. Energy drinks. How many energy drinks are there on the market?
Yeah, too many to count.
And what is everybody doing? Everybody in that category is trying to out crazy the last person. So I'm Red Bull, so now I'm going to call mine Monster. The next one's going to call theirs Venom. The next one's going to call theirs Liquid Death. And we're just going to keep ramping up the craziness, trying to be the most extreme. So where's the energy drink for conservative? That's a thing.
Yeah. Well, it absolutely is. I like to tell people when we dug into our data, we found at least 32 million people 80% more likely to buy your product or service if they know or feel like you're aligned with their conservative values. There's a separate survey identified 41 million faith-driven Americans along those same lines. So really, every company's ideal customer sits somewhere in that group of people, and there's probably some overlap. So let's call it 55 million or something like that. Somebody in that group is buying everything, right? There are people in those groups are buying cats and cars, and some of them are race car drivers even. and so there is an audience for you inside that ecosystem.
There is. And when you look at, there's a number of ways to go around it and look at these particular issues. There are products that sell to the left. So as an example, Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's is ice cream for Democrats. It's as simple as that. And will conservatives go out and buy Ben & Jerry's? I know a lot of conservatives that don't, and I know some of them will if that's the only thing that's available, but as a tendency, they'll shy away from it. We have a lot of Gallup studies and a lot of Pew studies. So as an example, Gallup studies show us that someone is about 82% likely to pick up an eco-friendly product if all other things are equal. They're about 80% more likely to pick up a healthy item if all other things are equal. Price, size, taste, if everything is comparable, then there's about an 80% chance you can flip somebody on that soft difference. Whether that difference is I'm eco-friendly, I'm health-focused, I support conservative causes, I support faith causes, it's the tiebreaker. It's the thing that breaks the tie. Like when we look at Susan G. Komen, and you see all kinds of products that, will put a pink ribbon on the product. The pink ribbon, I can assure you, doesn't sell one more can of Campbell's soup. They put it on there and nobody goes out and says, well, I really don't need any soup today, but it's got a pink ribbon on it, so I guess I'll be a soup eater today. No, I'm buying soup today and they've got Campbell's soups all over the shelf, and here's a store brand soup. And yeah, and you know what? I'll spend an extra 20 cents and I'll get the Campbell soup instead of the Kroger brand because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month and they've got a ribbon on. It's the tiebreaker. And where I'm going with this on the tiebreaker is you can be a brand with conservative values. You can be a brand with faith values. You can be a brand focused on, supporting life, all these causes. You still need to be a great product or service. A bad product isn't going to survive because you donate to Republican candidates. You still need to make an amazing product or service, and you need to have amazing follow-up and amazing customer experience. So when I look at people like you or people like me, we don't build brands. We guide brands, but what we really are is we're a dating service. We're Match.com. Our job is to get you as many first dates as possible this afternoon. We're going to get your coffee or your energy drink or your roofing company, whatever the case is, we're going to get you as many first dates as possible. It is up to the brand to get the second date. And it's up to the brand to get engaged. And it's up to the brand to get married. Because we can get you the first date. We can't make you desirable.
Right. Well, and it's so true. And even when you want to create raving fans, right, and people that are passionate about your brand, like you said, you have to go further than the values and the marketing. They want to expect that amazing service. You know, when I talk about Chick-fil-A and why I enjoy eating there, now they have an amazing chicken sandwich, but everything down to their efficiency, how you order, how they get the orders correct, the follow-up, everything about that business and how they operate provides that experience for the customer. And so you're 100%.
The product and the service meet your expectations, meet or exceed your expectations. And the fact that the owners close the stores on Sunday because of their faith is a tiebreaker for you. That's the thing that'll say, you know what, I'd rather go to Chick-fil-A than go to Raising Cane, who has a similar product, because I have this ethos with these people. But if you look at brands like Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson is not Harley Davidson because they made some great ads. Harley Davidson is Harley Davidson because they created a lifestyle. It is part of your life for most Harley owners. Now, I do own a Harley and I do ride a Harley. I'm not what I would say a Harley lifestyle person. I do argue the point that motorcycle riders are the largest cosplay group in America, and no one has been able to prove me wrong on that. But Harley makes a great machine. It's extremely durable. Their service is second to none. I mean, it's amazing. You can pull into any Harley store, any place in America. If you're touring with your bike, which I've done, and your bike has a problem, I've pulled into a Harley store at 6:00 on a Sunday when they were closing, and they keep the store open to fix the bike. Because that's their ethos. We're here for you. We're going to build you a great machine. We're going to be here for you. And you know that you can go to any Harley store, any place in America, if you're in trouble, and we're going to fix you. That's what you're buying. Now, does Honda make good bikes? Honda makes great bikes. Probably a better bike than Harley, actually, as far as durability. But the rest of the story's not there. The ethos isn't there. The service isn't there. The camaraderie isn't there. The shared values aren't there. I go out and ride motorcycles sometimes with groups of guys. Those guys will be diverse from myself to a psychiatrist, to a plastic surgeon, to an attorney, to a factory worker, to a janitor. And we're all riding together. We're all riding the same kind of bike. And we're all stopping to have lunch. And guess what? Everybody's equal. The plastic surgeon isn't looking down at the guy who's the janitor, because the bike is what's uniting us. Well, conservatism unites us. Faith unites us. We can have this tribal community when we have these shared values. And that's why I think you guys are dead on. The other thing that I think people need to decide when you're in business, and that is, brands are more and more having to choose a side. It didn't used to be that way, but it's becoming more of the norm. And depending on what you do for a living, you may find that you need to take a side. That you need to put that stake in the ground and say, this is who we are and these are the values that we have, and not be afraid of it. You don't need to have 340 million Americans want your product. You just need a couple of million Americans to be on fire passionate for your product. And you will have a good company.
Absolutely. And we are seeing that over and over again right now in the market, and it's a growing space. I think Public Square, which aggregates a lot of these Liberty Spender type businesses in one website, sort of like an Amazon, but for our our tribe, they're now, I think, aggregating 85,000 businesses. They're actually putting together a conference for them for the first time this year in October called the Parallel Economy Summit. So there's a lot of momentum, I think, in this space.
I think there is. And again, I keep saying conservatives and Christians. As groups, we've not done a great job of supporting our own people in the past. Other groups have done a better job. When the left gets together and decides they're going to boycott some retailer, they've done a better job of it.
Yeah.
More recently, we've had a better job. I mean, we'll go back to the Bud Light thing.
Uh-huh.
Bud Light's got a 100-year-old brand, with the Bud Light being a 30 or 40-year-old brand, and it took them 60 seconds to ruin it.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they ruined it, they didn't actually ruin it by sending it to Dylan Mulvaney. They could have survived that. They ruined it by putting their marketing manager in an interview where she said, well, we were tired of our beer just being like a frat boy brand, and we needed to become more inclusive. She destroyed it because she literally told the Bud Light consumer, we think you guys are kind of a bunch of frat boy idiots. And we think there's a better crowd out there because we really think the transgender community is the big beer drinkers. And beer drinkers had the ability to say, no, to heck with you guys. We have other options.
Mm-hmm.
We have other choices. And that brand will never come back. We know from research that when a brand makes a major misstep, the average time to recover from the misstep is 19 years.
Oh, wow.
And what that amounts to is it essentially takes a generation for the stupid move to kind of fade from memory.
Yeah, I mean, I see it anecdotally all over. I try to keep my eyes open in our sort of red neighborhoods and see who's consuming Bud Light. It's few and far in between. And
they'll never recover this.
Yeah.
The other reason they'll never recover it is because they were already in a category that was in decline. So beer drinking as a practice is declining. So you're in a declining universe and you decide to kill your brand. So you have two headwinds against you now.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things we've talked about internally. You know, we want to help brands that are launching products in this market. And a lot of them are small brands really taking off. Maybe they're launching something new. But we also feel like we're a resource for a big brand who maybe a single phone call to somebody who represents 60% of their customer base might have saved them $47 billion. And, there's just no one, and it happens across the board, no matter what side of the aisle you're from or where your faith is, where you surround yourself too much with people who feel the way you do or have the same kind of inklings and biases, and then you fail to notice we've drifted away from who our core consumer is here. And there's no one in the room raising their hand saying, maybe we should rethink this. Yeah.
Well, you need to be, you need to fall in love with your customer. You need to care about what they care about and what motivates them, what moves them, what they value. And like it or not, that just, as you said, that was just a giant marketing misstep.
And you're absolutely right. People will sniff out a phony.
Yep.
So I will also tell you that if you're working for Joe Biden, don't try to sell your product based on we're going to send money to Trump, because you're going to get found out.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. You need to understand that you need to feel and share real values with your consumer. That's why they do business with you, because the customer unconsciously, this is not a conscious decision. It's an unconscious decision. where people realize these people get me.
Right.
This brand gets me. I get them. We share values. We're alike. People want to do business with people they like, the people that are like them, and people who appreciate them. So that's why you can lean into it. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention to you, you can still market to like a Liberty Spender market. You could still market to a conservative market and not necessarily step off the, we're going to send money to Donald Trump level of support.
Yeah.
Because you can still have a soft message that appeals to that audience, and you can respect that audience by speaking to them in terms that they appreciate without necessarily having to become Mike Lindell.
Right.
Right. Exactly. And authenticity is so key. It's just so important. And when we work with clients, we talk to them about what are the values that are authentic and true for you, right? There's no litmus test. There's no saying that you have to go on this ledge or you have to go and be wildly controversial in a way that you don't even agree with or that you worry about will impact your brand. It's just finding out what those are and what do you have to offer your customers and where do you think you align. So I think what you're saying is 100% correct, and it's so valuable for people to recognize that distinction.
Yeah, we call it issue positioning, right? You're essentially, even with the Black Rifle Coffee Company example, their values, their ethos around veterans, supporting the military, which is an issue approach. It was, to your point, there was never a promise to support any political party or not. There wasn't any endorsement beyond perhaps the Second Amendment, but so they never articulated themselves as some sort of Republican brand, but everybody gets the joke, and the audience that they were after connect with it.
We also see that, and you guys see this because of what you do for a living. Politics tend to go through swings. We'll say the pendulum swing.
Right.
The creation of Donald Trump, the president, forced the pendulum to swing far to the left. Because Trump, being the polarizing person that he is and being the type of campaigner that he is, he probably forced many of the people on the left to show their cards more than they would have liked to.
Right.
And we now see that there is a legitimate Marxist wing of the Democratic Party. We now see this. And we see the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders who try calling themselves socialist Democrats.
Right.
Which isn't actually a thing.
Right.
But we also see that the majority of America doesn't agree with this. So that pendulum is falling. That pendulum on the far left is falling. And I believe that pendulum is about to make a big swing to the right side, which would be normal. Then you have a pendulum that is extremely to one side. You and I mentioned this off air, that Bowman lost his election, his primary yesterday. That's a really good example of America. Even Democrat Americans are rejecting the extremism of some of these positions. So you don't even have to position your brand at one extreme or the other. You can position your brand as being American.
Yeah.
So that's exactly right. And what's interesting to your point is just, I know I've talked to friends who say, why all of a sudden am I seeing a lot of Bill Maher clips in my social media feed? Why is that being fed by the algorithms, and him speaking out and talking about how just common sense is lost and his frustration with what he felt like before was, classical liberalism or whatever. And that's just not the case. And that so much is just people, he thinks they've just jumped the shark, beyond what would be where you could back up with common sense and reason and logic. And so to your point, there are definitely people that are becoming disaffected and feeling like, whoa, some of this stuff has just gone too far.
Yeah. Well, it's a good transition to talk a little bit about the Blunt Force Truth podcast. I think you co-host that with Chuck Woolery, right?
Chuck and I have been co-hosting that show for 12 years. Chuck's not on every episode now. He's been kind of taking a little bit of a break. And Chuck's 83, and he's deserved the ability to be able to come and go as he wants at this point.
Yeah. Well, he's got 40 more years, we know now.
Blunt Force Truth is so here's where I'll tell you really quick how that podcast came to be. Years ago, Chuck and I were riding motorcycles together through suburbs of Michigan. And we stopped at a Tim Hortons and we're having a drink. We're complaining about politics. And Chuck says to me, he goes, we're always talking about this, but we never do anything. And I said, okay, I got an idea. Let's shoot some videos and stick them on YouTube. So I went and I wrote up these videos, and they are hysterical.
Ish.
And they're on YouTube, and they get millions of hits, and it's called Save Us Chuck Woolery. And we did how to solve the border crisis. They're all short. And we did, how to invade Canada. We did one on why we need to tax the Amish. I mean, we did all these different videos, and Chuck did them in front of the fireplace in my house, and he was like channeling Walter Cronkite. So he's sitting in front of the fire, and he goes, "Hello, America, Chuck Woolery here." and we would do these little shorts. So we took these and we stuck them out on YouTube, and we didn't do it. It's like, okay, put them on YouTube. Let's see what happens. A few days go by, and I get a phone call. And the guy says he's Andrew Breitbart.
Ugh.
Like, really? This is Andrew? No, this is Andrew Breitbart. You guys are amazing. What guys? You and Chuck. We are? And then Glenn Beck calls. And I'm like, Chuck, have you been on YouTube yet? No, why? So I go and look, and it's like, holy crap, we've got 3 million views on this video.
So you're telling me you didn't even know until they reached out to you?
No.
That's
so here's
how did he not get the cat or kill the cat? You didn't want to.
It's good. You're not the one sitting there waiting.
Right.
Nope.
Fresh. Yeah.
So Chuck and I are sitting there, and so this is what we couldn't believe. So within 30 days, we were on Andrew Breitbart's network. We were on the Glenn Beck show, and we were invited to speak at the RNC and to speak at CPAC.
Wow.
And Chuck and I are looking at each other, and we're like, what is wrong with these people? Why are they listening to a game show host and an ad guy? And that's how the podcast happened. So we started doing these videos, and then a radio network came to us and asked us if we wanted to do syndicated radio. So we had about 100 radio stations, 120 radio stations.
Damn.
And we didn't care about the money. We cared about what our message was. So radio stations would start to complain. Well, you guys can't say that. Well, we don't want you talking about this. So we literally called the network up, and we said, this several years back, at the end of the contract, we're not going to do radio anymore. We're just going to do a podcast because we're going to say whatever the hell we want to say.
Right.
This sounds familiar. I'm sensing a trend here.
Yes. So we're going to say whatever we want to say, and we don't need to worry about radio stations. So we take stuff on. I will, this is an absolute verifiable true statement. In May of 2020, we did an episode where I brought friends of mine on who are medical professionals who have subsequently to that show created something called America's Frontline Doctors after being on our show. And we explained to America what COVID was, exactly where COVID came from, where it was invented, why there would never be a vaccine, why they would try to force a vaccine onto you, why that vaccine was going to make you sick. We covered every inch of that in May of 2020 before the vaccine was even a thought yet, before it was even on the market or even approved or anything. And the reason was because the people we brought on were the people who were hired by the government to create the vaccine for SARS-CoV-1.
Mm.
COVID is SARS-CoV-2. They already knew it couldn't be done because they already said every vaccine we made caused more problems than the disease. And lo and behold, what do we have in front of us now? We have people getting cancers. We have people with myocarditis. We have stroke victims that are happening. Even the CDC has now accepted the notion that there are people getting sick from the vaccine. So we couldn't do those things on the radio.
No, not in May of 2020, I'll tell you.
No, for sure.
Yeah, and we couldn't do them now either. So that's why we became a podcast, so that we could speak the truth the way that we see the truth happen.
Well, it's much needed. I'll tell you what, my faith in independent media and in some of the lions of the media world to report critically on, both sides of an issue, or to look at what the government's putting out and do more than just be an echo chamber, was really rattled so much. I've always had to concern about the left-leaning bias, for example, of, say, the New York Times or Washington Post. But I guess maybe I was a little naive. I never thought that they would end up being mouthpieces for giant pharmaceutical companies and, government bureaucrats, without really even seriously considering that what they were putting out there, was somebody's agenda. And even now, still, I think, struggling to admit that they were duped. And so it's important to have folks like the Blunt Force Truth podcast out there, putting people like that on the air.
And that's where the name came from. We were talking about names for the show. And Chuck said, well, it's kind of like blunt force trauma. And I'm like, I don't know if people want to listen to a show called Blunt Force Trauma. I said, well, what about if we change the trauma to truth?
There's the ad guy.
Yeah.
And Chuck's like, Blunt Force Truth. I like that.
Yeah.
That's where the name came from. He originally wanted it to be Blunt Force Trauma.
Yeah. Well,
I believe it is blunt force trauma based on some of the responses that we get from some people on the left. And I do get, still get the occasional death threat. There was an interview 4 or 5 years ago. Donald Trump did an interview and they were asking him, what media does he consume? And he put out 3 things that he consumes, and one of them was Blunt Force Truth.
Wow.
And when that went out, we went through 4 to 6 weeks of nonstop death threats. My switchboard, my receptionist getting people calling there, threatening her, calling her she should die. People emailing me. I was getting emails from people saying, I hope your children die slow, agonizing deaths in front of you.
Ugh.
Because Donald Trump listens to you.
Well,
how sad for those people. I mean, what a tragic, horrible way to live and think.
Yeah.
If I could share one more statistic. I love research. Pew did a research on mental health, and what they found. So they did a fairly large research, and the question was, have you been diagnosed with a mental disorder in the past 12 months by a medical professional? Very specific question.
Right.
A doctor within 12 months has said, you got a mental problem. 53% of all women who identified themselves as a Democrat have been diagnosed with a mental disorder within 12 months. That does not mean that they were diagnosed 18 months ago, 24 months ago, or they haven't been to a doctor. The number on men was 34%, and the number on people under 30, men and women, is almost 60. Now, people who identified as a Republican, they too had been diagnosed with mental disorders, but it was in the teens.
Yeah.
And independence was interesting because independence was a mix between Republicans and Democrats. So, and that would make sense because independents are going to be made up of both of those belief systems. So Republicans were the least likely to have been diagnosed. Independents were the second. Self-proclaimed or self-identified Democrats are over half of them have a doctor saying you have a mental disorder. That most common mental disorder is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You said something at the beginning of the podcast, and that is you have people who live in fear, people who do not live in fear. That is people who live in abundance versus people who live in scarcity. Capitalists, conservatives, we live in a world of abundance. We believe that the future is bigger than our past. We believe that the best days are still in front of us. We believe that just because Elon Musk has 200 billion doesn't mean I can't have 200 billion. When you live in scarcity, you believe if Elon Musk has 200 billion, he's hoarding all the money and therefore I can't have any. Because you think of money as being this finite number, not a number that can be created. And you live in fear. So when you're dealing with these people, you have to understand you're dealing with people who live in fear. Now, if you want to sell your goods and services, do you want to sell your goods and services to people who believe in scarcity, who believe they don't deserve something, who believe that they're going to run out of money, who believe the country's coming to an end, who think Donald Trump's going to become a dictator and somebody's going to throw me in a gulag? Or do you want to try to sell your product to people who believe tomorrow is going to be better than today and the economy is going to get better and my life's going to improve and my best days are in front of me? Because guess what? Those are easier people to sell your product to.
Yeah. And more fun people to be around. And I think that's a message we all need to hear right now. And it's a great way to kind of get to perhaps the culmination of our episode here is just that optimism, to your point, that there is a better and greater future ahead for our country. There's more abundance to be created. There's more life to be lived, even as a race car driver. And we should all be out there seeking it.
As the great Dan Sullivan says, the eye only sees and the ear only hears what the mind goes looking for.
Absolutely. Well,
if you're looking for a dystopian future, you'll find one. If you're looking for an opportunity and a bigger future, you'll find that too.
Yeah. Well, for people who want to find you, should they look you up at Jekyll and Hyde Labs?
There's a couple places. One of the easy places to go to if you want to see everything, if you want to see the books, the podcasts, and all that stuff, you can actually go to meetmarkyoung.com. And there you'll find links to all the different companies I own, the books, the podcasts, videos, all that stuff is all right there at meetmarkyoung.com.
That's awesome. Well, we've really enjoyed every minute of this. I will have to do it again. And
we'll be inviting you over to Blunt Force Truth.
Yes.
And we'll talk about Liberty Spenders.
And I'm looking forward to that conversation. Very excited about it. And, really want to say thank you to all of our listeners. Definitely check Dr. Young out at meetmarkyoung.com.
Yep. Meetmarkyoung.com.
And until next time, thanks for listening.